Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Good to see you. Can y'all hear me? Yes. Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna switch microphones for a second. Beautiful. Oh yeah. All right, thanks for bearing with me for a second. Hello, thank you all so much for coming out, spending your Friday evening here with us. My name is Ismail, and I'm the events director at Books on Magic, which, if you don't know, is a lovely little independent bookstore just a couple blocks away from here. So, we are so excited to kick off tonight's event, but before we get started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how it's going to go. First off, I want to give a huge thank you to Wild East for letting us use this fantastic space for tonight's event. Please feel free to get some drinks and tip your bartenders, and if you need to use a restroom, it's just outside this room to the right. After the talk tonight, Rita will be around to sign and personalize your books. That's going to be happening right up on this stage. And of course, we have plenty of additional copies available for purchase of Headshot, as well as of the books of some of the other writers joining tonight's event. Lastly, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Headshot online using the link in the live stream description. Now, we've got a packed lineup for you all tonight, so I'm going to try to make this intro brief. Before I get to the first act of this evening, I just have to take a second to gush about this fabulous debut novel. Headshot is truly special in both its form and its content. Rita's prose is so compelling and cinematic, I felt myself standing in the corner of this musty little gym in Reno, Nevada, listening to these girls' heavy breaths and quick hits. If you've already read it, you know exactly what I mean, and if you haven't, I promise you, you will not be able to put it down. To celebrate this debut, Rita has brought together an amazing group of writers and artists who I will now introduce, or at least the first. Up first, to start off this evening, we have Will Epstein, who is a composer, improviser, and songwriter born here in New York City. In addition to recently completing scores for the Martha Graham Dance Company and the documentary Nam June Paik, Moon is the Oldest TV, Will has worked on major pieces for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Joyce Theater, and Jacob's Pillow. His albums Whims and Wendy were released by Fat Possum Records in 2022 and 2023, respectively. Let's all give Will Epstein a big round of applause. right, let's all hear it for Will Epstein. Thank you so much for kicking us off with that. Now we're going to move into the reading portion of tonight. So I'm going to read off everyone's bios, and then you're going to hear, 40 or so minutes of some really lovely writing and conversation. So first off, I'm going to introduce Catherine Lacey, who is the author of the novels Nobody Is Ever Missing, The Answers, and Pew, and of the short story collection Certain American States. She has received a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Whiting Award, New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award, and a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship. Her essays and short fiction have appeared in The New Yorker, Harper's Magazine, The New York Times, The Believer, and elsewhere. We also have Hilary Leichter, who is the author of the novels Terror Story and Temporary, which was a finalist for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize and the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award, and was longlisted for the Penn Hemingway Award. She teaches at Columbia University and lives in Brooklyn, New York. Ismail Muhammad is a writer and critic based in Oakland, California, where he works as the reviews editor at The Believer and a contributing editor at Zaziva. I never know how to pronounce that. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Slate, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, among other venues. He is currently working on a novel. Pam Zhang is the author of How Much of These Hills is Gold, winner of the Academy of Arts and Letters Rosenthal Award and the Asian Pacific Award for Literature, longlisted for the Booker Prize, and one of Barack Obama's favorite books of the year. She's also the author of The Land of Milk and Honey and is a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree and a New York Public Library Coleman Fellow. And finally, the writer we're all here to see tonight, Rita Bullwinkel, is the author of Belia, a story collection that won the Believer Book Award. She's the editor of McSweeney's Quarterly, the deputy editor of The Believer, and a contributing editor at Noon. She lives in San Francisco and teaches at the California College of Arts and the University of San Francisco. Okay, I know I did those bios out of order, but first we have Pam coming up. So let's give her and the rest of the writers we have tonight a very, very warm welcome.
I'm so happy to be here to celebrate Rita's beautiful book, and I think a fitting response to the music we heard is that I'm going to read some poems tonight by the Palestinian-American poet Hala Al-Yed. This first one is called Topography. It was first published in The New Yorker in 2021. The land is a crick in the neck. An orange grove burns, and it's sour when you burp. Whose voice is that? There's a fable. There's a key. Every Ramadan, the artery suffers first. A diet of heavy lamb and checkpoint papers. Indigestion like a nightmare. The Taurus sun burns your forehead. I mean the land. The land looks white on the MRI images. You call your grandfather. He's been finding the land in his stool. His body contours the mattress like a coffin. His hand trembles. When he drinks the land, the urine comes out rose-colored. The land sears the esophagus. No more lemons, the doctor says. 2 pillows at least. In July, you lived inside your grandfather like a settlement. You ate currant sorbet from the same cup. Did you inherit the land in your arthritic wrist? It makes knitting hell. On the telephone, your grandfather tells you the land is coating his eyes. He tells you it is worth being alive just to see that blue. He dies and they harness his body to the dirt. He dies and the sun is out all week. The second poem is called Half-Life in Exile. I'm forever living between Aprils. The air here smells of jacarandas and lime. It's sunset before I know it. I'm supposed to rest, but that's where the children live. In the hot mist of sleep, dream after dream. Instead, I obsess. I draw stars on receipts. Everybody loves the poem. It's embroidered on a pillow in Milwaukee. It's done nothing for Palestine. There are plants out west that emerge only after fires. They listen for smoke. I wrote the poem after weeks of despair, hauling myself like a rock. Everyone loves the poem. The plants are called fire followers, but sometimes it's after the rains. At night, I am a zombie feeding on the comments. Is it compulsive to watch videos? Is it compulsive to memorize names? Rafif and Amar and Mahmoud. Poppies and snapdragons and calendrinias. I can't hear you. I can't hear you under the missiles. A plant waits for fire to grow. A child waits for a siren. It must be a child. Never a man. Never a man without a child. There is nothing more terrible than waiting for the terrible, I promise. Was the grief worth the poem? No, but you don't interrogate a weed for what it does with wreckage, for what it's done to get here. Thank you. That was so beautiful.
Rita, thank you so much for inviting all of us to be a part of your special day and celebrate this amazing book. My books are sort of like less headshots and more couch shots. And I really wanted to read something sporty tonight to celebrate this book, but all I could find was a sentence about a Frisbee, so, which would be very short. So I wrote something for tonight for you, and this is the most athletic thing I'll ever write. And it's called Soft Pretzel. The first unlikely catch happened when Michelle was 12. She was playing left field in a Little League softball game on a team named after the local laundromat. All the teams were named after small businesses. Their shirts were a nice royal blue, and the coaches printed trading cards with the girls' photos and placed them in store windows. There were stats on the back of each card, but the stats were not stats, they were just hobbies. The catch happened in left field during an away game. It was a fly ball that was not expected to land in Michelle's glove, but it did. She shoved her arm into the air and caught the ball without even looking up, just reaching towards some unknown outcome. She knew she would catch the ball even before mitt contact had been achieved. The smell of her glove that day was the same as the smell of the football during the second unlikely catch, which happened much later. Michelle got a ride home from the away game with the coach and the coach's daughter, who was not the best player on the team, but had implicit power and status in her familial advisory role. "That was a great catch," the coach's daughter said, with authority. The next day, Michelle found a leftover bit of soft pretzel in her bag, but it had turned stale. It wasn't soft anymore. What am I thinking? The second catch happened when Michelle was in high school, playing flag football during gym. Michelle did not make an effort in gym. She did not want her body to smell effortful for the rest of the day, and she did not want to shower in the locker room to wash away the effort after gym. She generally only moved when movement was necessary. On this particular day, it was raining. But when the football flew toward her classmates, she knew she could intercept the pass. She knew she could throw her body sideways and catch the ball against her chest, both the ball and the body in midair. Was this a legitimate thing to do? Michelle did not understand football. She made a sort of whoa sound like she was studying a horse, and she lunged to the left. There, on the high school field, in the rain, she lunged to the left, and she caught the ball, and she landed on both feet. Everyone in gym class looked at her with total confusion. It was the confusion that comes with witnessing somebody openly caring about something when no one was supposed to ever care about anything. She felt embarrassed for caring. There were soft pretzels in the cafeteria that day, and Michelle wrapped hers in a napkin to eat between 5th and 6th period, but she forgot. She forgot about the pretzel in her locker for months. It sat there hard as a rock. She forgot about the pretzel, but also on some level, she knew it was there. She knew it was there. She forgot, but she really knew. She was making a decision every day to let it turn to stone. In the freezer section of certain grocery stores, you can buy soft pretzels, and they even come with mini pots of mustard. You can eat them at home. You can eat them on the couch. But of course, it's not the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for gathering all these great artists for this celebration of you. Thanks for bringing a bit of a California glamour out east. I'm going to read from a work in progress that is appropriately maybe about California. The thing was too big for me to lift and swing with any force, and I spent most of my time before my mom saw me out the living room window trying, feebly, to grip the wooden handle that had grown slick with my own sweat. Years later, she'd tell me that the sight of me struggling to fell the neighbor's tree made her laugh before she bellowed for me to drop the axe. And the way that I hurried to land one more weak blow on the trunk, thicker than my torso, she remembered, before my father dashed out the front and sent me running, made her laugh again. I reminded her so much of a skinny John Henry. In my memory, I haul ass down the side alley separating our property from Sheila's, whose oak tree had grown to be so enormous that it had reached over the fence into our yard and blocked the view of the city from our living room. The thing had been growing for God knows how long, and its branches had begun extending in unruly offshoots without any discernible order. Eventually, the only thing you could see from that window was a wall of leaves that, when the wind hit them, floated from side to side as if to wave at my grandma Lydia. In the last year of her life, up until the treatment made doing anything other than succumbing impossible, she spent every morning and afternoon sitting at that window, trying to see out over the city she had called home for 45 years. It was unlikely, this poor girl from northern Louisiana owning a house in the LA hills. In old pictures, you could see that the window provided a clear view all the way down the hill of the jacaranda trees and jasmine bushes and birds of paradise that lined the block, and the incongruous houses they fronted, all the Edwardian craftsmen and ranch-style homes that the neighborhood's previous residents had erected with gleeful haphazardness in the 1920s, with the blessed ignorance of concepts like neighborhood character. It was that view that had made her purchase the house, where she relished gathering 3 generations of her family in one place, her ascent made literal. She died without being able to see exactly where her stay in LA had deposited her. She didn't see the oceanic haze encroaching on the South Bay, or the traffic moving with the smooth serpentine elegance west along Slauson, or the growth of a city that had once greeted her with a country charm that had then been borne out, along with her white neighbors, along the 405, north to Selmar and all those distant suburban hamlets from which they'd flee only a decade later. My mom spent a year calling, emailing, knocking, begging, and she was not the begging type. Sheila to do something about that oak. But Sheila lived in El Segundo and didn't think much about the little bungalow that she rented out to a few cousins of hers. Which is how, I suppose, who can remember precisely what goes on in the mind of their younger selves, I ended up going to the backyard shack, trying my father's gloves before finding they wouldn't fit and abandoning them. I lifted his axe off the wall, tried to carry it with the blade facing up and over my shoulder, the way I'd seen him do it, before deciding I just had to drag it through the backyard, down that alley, and out to the oak. When my mom said that she laughed, I had to wonder, did she concoct the laugh in retrospect? A bit of revisionism to make everything that unfolded after seem like something other than it was? The look she daggered at me hurt almost as much as the pop in the mouth. That's what it was in our family's parlance. Pop, as innocuous sounding as a can of soda, or the pop, pop, pop of firecrackers in the summer. A formulation that hit as much as it told. Pop, the sound of the back of her hand set loose when landing on my hollow cheek, my mouth rounded in useless explanation of this new fuck up. Pop, the sound I'd hear in my head for a few minutes after, straining to focus on the words she was now over-enunciating in that deliberate voice I hated. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Rita, for having us. This is so fun. And it's such a nice feeling in here. And can't wait to read it. And I'm such a fan of Rita's writing from before. And yay. And all these guys, everybody's great. I'm going to read from this, also the only athletic story that I could find. It's called Man Mountain. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. I cannot say I fully understood where it came from, but I think we all understood in a way where it came from. Not physically, I mean, no one could really explain that, but the mountain's sudden appearance was at least understandable from a metaphoric, philosophical, and/or emotional perspective, which is to say that it made sense astrologically, even if it didn't make sense logically. Logic and reason, remember reason, had long ago fallen out of fashion. The calm among us kept saying that there was no need to worry, that history was cyclical, and we had simply entered a recurrent era of abject chaos. This was the goodnight mush part of the century. Time for the, I always fuck up this word. Time for the chrysalis to turn soupy. The little thing that the butterfly comes out of. Chrysalis? Why did I put that word in the story? This was the year a mountain spontaneously materialized in rural Kansas, 1 kilometer high, composed entirely of semi-conscious adult men. When I heard about the Man Mountain, I was, of course, at the gym. Those of us not comforted by the historical view of the contemporary moment, a nagging sense of being pre-war, had taken matters into our own hands in the only way that we could, that is, symbolically, and began training for a figurative and literal war that were both imminent and present. Most of the women that I knew kept strict training schedules in Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, and semi-acrobatic styles of weightlifting. In idle moments, we imagined perfecting our pull-ups, our push-ups, our jabs, and our jump squats, and we pitied the women who still did yoga, except the ones who did that torturous, heated variety with their tongues sticking out, contorted, menacing, and psycho-spiritually weaponized. We felt they had not yet realized that inner peace was a patriarchalist fantasy, and that the only reasonable thing a woman could do now was amass an anti-estrogenic cluster of meat around her controversial guts and train for battle. Wish it were not so. So when the news broke about the Man Mountain, I just thought, what? And then, like so many unbelievable things, it became completely believable, and all there was left to do was to climb it. I spent a lot of time at my local climbing gym. Then I went rogue and started climbing buildings, trees, gates, traffic lights, anything. Maybe I didn't have time to eat solid food anymore, and maybe I wasn't being an effective employee, and perhaps I didn't have an actual human-on-human relationship in my day-to-day, but none of that mattered anymore because I was not exactly human, but something closer to a spider. So I drove straight to Kansas, and whoa. The pictures and videos and three-dimensional animated renderings of the Man Mountain had not really conveyed the thingness of this thing. It was a real stumper. It was, I don't know, a feat. But whose feat? A feat of what? Several news trucks were there, but none of the reporters could look away for long enough to read their teleprompters. Policemen and National Guardsmen and SWAT teams idled in dark hordes, but there seemed to be no agreement about how to proceed, which way to point their guns, whether it was a crime scene or not, whether it needed protection from the people or the other way around. The Man Mountain was not contingent or theoretical. It was not a think piece. It was here and large and undeniable. It was the only event for many years that lacked an obvious political narrative or conspiracy or apocrypha. The base was exceptionally easy to scale. scale, almost as if it had been designed that way. Holds were plentiful and well spaced. I grabbed a foot, an elbow, thigh, and buttocks gave gently beneath my feet. Up close, none of the men seemed to be asleep exactly, yet none were quite awake. Most of their eyes were shut or fluttering, and all of them held slight grins. They seemed to understand and accept the strange enormity of their predicament. Every limb I held as I scaled seemed to teem within itself, forcefully occupying its place in the pile. There was no passivity here, no victimization. The man mountain was, I inferred, a wonder of sheer will. About 30 feet up, I came across Justin. Justin? What are you doing here? Whoa, Justin! His eyes shocked open like a corpse in a horror film, which would have startled me if I hadn't been engaged in military-grade stress training for several years. Justin began to move his mouth, the muscles all loose and uncontrolled like an infant's. Hey. Yeah, I said, hey. A broad man sandwiched sideways in the mountain created a ledge that I rested on to talk to Justin. It's been a while, I said. Yeah, he said. Are you all right? Do you want me to get you some help or get you out of here? Or, nah. Cool. Okay, well, maybe I'll see you around. But Justin didn't reply, so I kept moving upward. I think that's a good place for Rita to come up. Up here at the top of Man Mountain.
Oh my gosh, okay, thank you all so much for being here. Huge gratitude to Will, Catherine, Ismail, Pam, and Hilary for being willing to participate in this maximalist harebrained evening. Amelie, I have your help, and thank you, oh my God, for everything. I'd like to raise this up high so that I can turn the pages. Amazing.
Let's do it the other way. Okay. No. Here, I'm You also do AP. Oh, okay. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I made a fool of myself.
Wow. Thank you so much, Will. Okay, I wrote this book. It's called Headshot. And it's about a youth women's boxing tournament in Reno and the strange, gooey ways that the playing of games has the ability to create a collective memory. And I'm just going to read to you the first pages from the beginning. Andy Taylor is pumping her hands together, hitting her own flat stomach, thinking not of her mother sitting at home with her little brother, not of her car, which barely got her here, not of her summer job, her lifeguarding at the overcrowded community pool, not of the 4-year-old she watched die, the 4-year-old she practically killed, and his blue cheeks. They shouldn't give teenagers the job of saving children. It doesn't matter how many CPR classes you've taken. She killed the boy with her wandering eyes. His swimsuit had small red trucks on it. He looked like he was made out of plastic. The feel of his thigh when she pulled him from the bottom of the pool, already dead, and the way it was so easy to grip because it was so small. She's not thinking about it. She's looking at the skylight and the light it's letting in on this shithole gym, and she's thinking about the things she always does wrong when she fights. Her lazy left guard, the way her left hand slips away and doesn't protect her face if she's not thinking about it. She's also thinking about the way Artemis Victor will get her if Andy Taylor doesn't think about this. This fight will be over in a matter of seconds. Andy Taylor needs to think about her spacing in her stomach. Andy Taylor needs to think about her stance. They're still sitting and looking at each other meanly. They know each other but have never fought before. When you join the Women's Youth Boxing League, this facade of a sports association makes you pay $200, and then you get a free subscription to their magazine, which profiles its members, young girl boxers, one by one, so you see who's out there, even if they are across the country, and you get a good sense of who you're up against, and you know who they've fought, and who they are going to fight, and what their favorite hobby is, because God only knows what what kind of a journalist writes this excuse for a magazine, but whoever it is seems to think it is valuable profile information and that it should be included in every athlete profile because in every issue there it is. Name, hometown, favorite color, hobby, wins and losses, photo of the girl in gloves. The photo is a wild card because some girls choose to take it in their gym clothes while others choose to take it in halter tops, their hair down, their heads tilted, and their gloves resting on their hips. Andy Taylor would know Artemis Victor anywhere because Artemis Victor is the youngest of the 3 Victor sisters, a family of boxers whose parents come to every single one of Artemis's matches with shirts that say Victor, which is, of course, ridiculous, their proclamation of their daughter's winning record on their chests. Everyone knows the Victor sisters and what they've won and what they've lost, and the judges treat Artemis's family like old friends, which in boxing is especially infuriating because the gray area of a call is often so present, and if you know the judge has a special relationship with the participants, you can't help thinking, I'm being slighted. This is the end of me. If only I had parents willing to befriend my coaches. If only I had parents who could get off work, who didn't work, who could come see me win. Mr. and Mrs. Victor sit in folding chairs next to the ring. There are barely over 24 other onlookers, judges, other girl fighters, a journalist from the local paper, a journalist from the Women's Youth Boxing Association magazine, parents, a grandmother, coaches, and Bob, the owner of this gym. Bob is also a coach, but as a rule doesn't coach women. He has no particular fighter he'd like to see win. His gym was just the right location for the tournament to take place in. All the coaches are men, and all the coaches own gyms, and all the coaches collect fees from the girls to, in part, pay the Women's Youth Boxing Association, who, in turn, pays the coaches for hosting regionals at their gyms. Some of the coaches were amateur boxers, but many of them have never competed at the level that these girls are fighting in. The girls' coaches travel to the tournament to get their checks from the association. In between rounds, Artemis's and Andy's coaches do speak to them, but the coaches speak only in cliches and useless information. Everything the coaches have taught the girls is in the past. The language of the coaches inside Bob's boxing palace is like the sound of the loud overhead fan. Artemis and Andy wish they could fight with less sound pollution. Every sound other than the smack of a hit is only a distraction. Artemis Victor is rolling her shoulders. She is looking at Andy Taylor and thinking, you are ugly. I am prettier than you, and I'm going to beat you too. Artemis sizes up other women physically everywhere. I'm the prettiest woman in this room, she thinks. There's one woman over there who may be prettier. If you like girls who look like drug addicts, there are men. There are men who like girls who look like drug addicts. When Artemis Victor thinks of herself in the future, she thinks of herself as wildly successful in a big house, maybe in Miami, not a drug addict. Artemis Victor has a teddy bear that has a doll shirt that says Victor. That's my girl, yells Mrs. Victor. Artemis Victor always thinks she's going to win. It's not a bad habit to get in. If one is capable of throwing self-doubt out the window, this power can be a beneficial weapon to deploy. Artemis Victor hates her oldest sister. Her oldest sister won the Daughters of America Cup 4 years ago. Her middle sister got a silver. Even if Artemis wins the whole thing, wins the whole tournament, and becomes the best in the country, the best woman under 18 in the United States at boxing, she'll still be second best to her oldest sister, Star Victor, because Star became the best in the country before her, and is now married with a husband and a child, and well on her way to owning a house, if not being rich. Artemis Victor has no idea what it takes to own a house, but she knows what it takes to beat other people, which is what owning property seems like, beating other people or owning a piece of earth and making that piece of earth yours, not to be shared with other people, because the owning of the property is the product of your victory over other humans, as in, you won more dollars than them, so now this slice of land is yours for keeps. It's not that Artemis is stupid. She'll make an excellent banker, though she'll become a wine distributor. It's just that her values are very narrow. She has an insanely good eye for reading people, for knowing what they are thinking under the words they are speaking, for watching how people hold themselves when they talk to you,
whether or not they are interested in you. She knows which of her high school teachers to feel bad for, the ones whose eyes dart around looking for someone to listen to them. She knows the right way to say a thing, to make people think she is interested in hearing them speak. Artemis Victor is also a vegan. She genuinely feels bad for animals. This was part of her profile in the Women's Youth Boxing Association magazine, the WYBA. Artemis Victor loves animals. She watched a documentary on the abuse of whales in theme parks and also thinks they should be let free. The referee is in the middle of the ring and is saying things to the girls about rules that they already know and have heard 100 times before. They nod their heads and get up off their stools and begin to bounce up and down. Andy is bouncing much more than Artemis. Artemis paces forward, steady. They're both wearing silk shorts and sports bras and tank tops. The elastic on their waistbands makes dents in their skin that will last for hours after they take their shorts off. A week ago, Andy came home and took off her shorts and looked at the red ring of gullies the shorts had left on her stomach. She fingered the indentations with her hands. When the marks disappeared an hour later, she was so sad not to have them. They seemed like evidence of the work she'd done. She wished she had a black eye for a winning fight to wear around, to show people she was fighting, to show people her body was doing something that was hard. Andy's knee is out too far and Artemis moves in to force Andy to retract it back under her hips. These are the size up seconds, the moments a fighter has to see if and where their opponent has weaknesses. If Artemis has a weakness, it is the fact that she is a legacy. Her sister's wins hang over her. She is reminded of them constantly. This is the tournament where she can be as good as her eldest sister or the worst boxer in her family. The type of legacy that is the Victor family is rarer in boxing than other kinds of sports, but not unheard of. Youth women's boxing is a world small enough that the Victors could conquer it. Andy Taylor's knee is still not in the right place. Artemis lifts her lip up to her nose to show her red mouth guard covered teeth. Artemis's biceps are balls of muscle. She can hit things harder than most people can throw a ball. Her back muscles are arched in two small hills on either side of her neck. Artemis begins to see a weakness in the way Andy moves, where Artemis thinks she can place a hit. Artemis Victor thinks that she can touch Andy Taylor. Just as Artemis thinks this, Andy hits the left side of Artemis Victor's ribs. It's a hard blow that the judges call a hit immediately. The score is yelled loud enough so everyone can hear it. This is a point-hitting game after all. That's why they wear padded headgear that circles their ears and cheeks and foreheads and buckles under their chins. This is target practice. Andy had seen a tunnel of vacancy between her right fist and Artemis's left rib cage. It had looked illuminated, like it was just begging to be filled with Andy's fist. Andy had put her hand in the hole to Artemis's body, that tunnel of vacancy, and then was filling the hole again and again until the referee got between them. The referee had checked the inside of Andy's gloves before he taped them onto her wrists. He was checking to see if she had put lead in them. They always do this before a match. It's part of the rules of the association. Andy loves when the referees reach into her gloves. She likes watching their hands go into a hole where her hands are about to go. The fact that they check every time makes Andy feel like she's capable of murder. She loves having an adult confirm that her fist could be a weapon. Maybe she could put a rock in there. Maybe she is capable of killing the girl she is fighting. Every time the referees look in her gloves, it is like they are saying, "You are capable of killing," which feels good to Andy. Most of the people in her life don't seem to believe she's capable of anything, let alone killing someone with purpose. And with the wandering eyes murder of the little boy, she wonders if she is also capable of killing someone with her fists. The boy with the red truck shorts, Andy wasn't thinking about him, was not even the worst thing that had happened to Andy or the first dead body she had seen, but it was the smallest. The other dead body had been her father's. The smallest of the dead boy had seemed especially disgusting. The day had been so clear and dry. She hadn't cried. She vomited after it was clear that the red truck kid was not going to come back to life. The vomiting made Andy feel like she herself was a small child. She was surprised by her body's visceral repulsion to the dead red truck kid. It was the image of his small, corn dog-sized thigh that made her vomit. Andy hit Artemis again, this time on Artemis's shoulder. How long could she get away with hitting Artemis Victor?
We don't need to go on the stage. We can go wherever. We can go wherever. Okay. All right. Oh, Will, you are amazing. No. Thank you. Wow.
Will Epstein, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm going to start talking into this mic and record it, and then Rita's going to start talking over me, and then Will start playing the piano.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do now. Wow. Okay. So I hate this question that I'm about to ask you, but you actually gave me new language. Now I love this question, and I'm going to ask this at all events now. But instead of asking you where this novel started, I want to know what was the tunnel of vacancy that led you into the book.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's such a good question. I was a competitive youth athlete. I'm not a boxer. I was never a boxer, but I did a lot of competitive youth sports growing up. And my parents would drive me, or I would drive myself to a lot of tournaments that looked and felt like the tournament in this book. And if any of you have ever been in sports facilities, they're very specific places like malls or convention centers where their architecture, no matter where you are, is kind of all the same. And as soon as you enter them, it's like you're entering a spaceship, and the rest of the world falls away. And I was interested in this trove of memories and trying to make sense of them, and in setting a world, in writing a book that was set in that world with the attitude almost as if someone was, or my attitude was almost as if writing a science fiction novel. Like there's this whole other world that exists inside the claustrophobia of a sports tournament, and could I make a whole other world inside just 2 days of a youth women's boxing tournament?
And you make at least 8 other worlds, and there are all these wild and uncanny ways you have of describing them. There's this one image that I think I'll think about forever, where each girl's inner life is a disc, almost like a CD stacked on top of another CD stacked on top of another, and they're all just existing in these parallel realities, but in the same place at the same time. So I woke up this morning after having a nightmare. You had invited all of us to do this event, and I had a dream that it was a tournament, and I was supposed to fight Artemis Victor. And I woke up and I was like, am I fighting Am I fighting Catherine Lacey tomorrow? God, no, like I forfeit. Please no. And then of course that's not what you did. You asked all of us to come be a part of this in this polyphonic event, to kind of give life to the strobing perspectives in your book, which is so generous. And this is a book about competition. And so I want to ask you, you're such a giving artist, and you're always making your space larger for other people. How do you think about competition in general and competition in art?
So the book, it's structured as a tournament bracket where these 8 main characters face off against one another. And when they're facing off against one another, they are technically in competition with one another, but they're also projecting their psyches upon one another. And my hope is that, as you progress through the book, you realize, one asks themselves, who are they fighting for? And they really are fighting almost to be witnessed by one another. And I think of them much more as comrades than adversaries. And I mean, I think there's something really kind of comforting about the way sports can declare an unnuanced level of victory that really doesn't exist anywhere else. And I think that kind of unnuanced binary of winning and losing is very attractive, especially in adolescence. And you know, the world is so confused, even now. I mean, I'm so confused by so many elements of the world that to enter a space where the rules of engagement are clear feels so deeply comforting. I don't know if I'm that competitive of a person. I mean, the book isn't about competition in some sense. I don't know, what do you think?
I think, well, I mean, it depends on the girl we're talking about.
That's
right?
true,
They're
that's
all-
true, that's true.
Some of them are,
Some of
they
them
have
really-
it,
yeah,
you know, they
yeah,
have like
yeah.
they're out for blood, but they're all ambitious for different things, you know, and the ambition, the way that you've written it requires them to topple someone, you know, so I think that's fascinating, but also to topple themselves maybe too, which is what's so beautiful about what you've done. It's, you know, they're confronting another human being, but really they're confronting their past and their futures and their present situations too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a later section, a later moment, maybe like 10 or 15 pages past the section I read this evening, where Artemis Victor reveals that her favorite thing to do after she's beaten someone is like befriend them, which is another mode of triumph for sure. She's one of the very competitive ones.
So I mean, I found them all so compelling, and I can't pick a favorite. And was there someone that you started with, or did you just start right at the beginning? Was there like a woman who was fascinating to you, and that was the woman who led you to each of the other characters?
I had a first draft of the novel that was written from the first person past tense perspective of just one young female boxer, and I can't even remember her name. She didn't come back into the second draft of the book. And when I reread that draft, I realized that the only part of this manuscript that was book length, but it was not a book. It was not meant to be a book. The only part of that manuscript that had any energy was when she was physically in the boxing ring with someone else. And that's when I knew I wanted to structure the book as a tournament and have 8 main characters and only have the entire book happen in scene in the middle of a boxing ring. I drew the tournament bracket like an hour after finishing reading that draft, and then I never went back.
And there's a wonderful moment where one of the girls imagines the tournament bracket turning on its side, and it's shaped like a family tree, which just took my breath away. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, tournament brackets, they're incredible. They're an incredible visual thing. They also can look like which the book talks about, a children's nursery mobile. I mean, writing a book that had a very narrow and claustrophobic structure, right? That each section has to be another match, and the bracket is almost like a map where you, as the reader, know what match is coming next. There was a point when I knew I had to curdle the bracket a little bit, which is when I turned it into a family tree or a children's nursery mobile.
I think one of the most compelling parts of the novel is just understanding the training that goes into becoming a semi-professional athlete, and the women in the book, their bodies are described as weapons, as tools, as meat, and it's incredibly physical. And I'm wondering, how did you train up for writing this book? You know, what kind of training went into writing a novel for you? Is it physical for you? I find like sometimes it is for me. I'm just curious. It's obviously a different kind of training, but is writing a novel athletic?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. It's making me think about how I feel like I write like as vertical as, as horizontal as possible. I'm like always in bed with my feet up, my head's like lying in bed, like really bringing my heart rate down. I even when I was in residence at McDowell, you get the studio and there's a bed in your studio, and I completely abandoned the desk I mean, I always thought, oh, I just don't work at a desk because I don't have one. Like, I don't have room for one in my living situation. And yet, when provided with the opportunity for desk, I still only was able to write in lounge position. So, I don't know. I don't find it a very physical act. I'm not like, pacing about a room.
With your gloves on.
Yeah. No. I'm like I'm barely breathing.
I'm so glad you read the beginning of the book because I love Andy Taylor, and she's one of maybe the more tragic girls, and also we get to see a lot of her. She reveals a lot when some of them don't know themselves as well, maybe. But the book starts with her telling us what she's not thinking about, and it reminded me of the great short story Bullet in the Brain, which is a different kind of headshot. It's a bullet traveling through a brain, and the end of that story is everything he's not thinking about as the bullet moves through the brain. And it started making me think about, what's not on the page, but we put it on the page anyway. So instead of what were you thinking about while writing this book, what weren't you thinking about when you wrote this?
What was I not thinking about? Like what is this book at the periphery of the book, but it's like maybe not in it?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, the book makes some like maybe ambitious leaps in time, not only within each of the 8 main characters. You hear about all of their childhoods, and you learn how most of them will die. But it starts with a epigraph from like the first recorded instance of women playing sports in Greece, and ends. I don't think it's a spoiler.
No, I don't think it is.
Hilary and I both wrote books that end in outer space. And it ends in space.
I mean, you got this suit on the moon, right?
I got it on the moon while writing the final section of the book. Yeah, and I mean, it felt like the periphery of the book is that like, okay, we're spending these 2 days with these 8 main characters, but isn't this just something continual that's happened 1,000 times before and will happen 1,000,000 times forever and ever? That this inaction is like just a specific instance, a specific case of 8 young women doing something that has always been done and will always be done. And I don't know if that was fully in the book, but it was something I was reaching for at the periphery, with perhaps these very, very small nods to like a time continuum of some kind.
I think we have time for like one more question. So the coaches in this novel are so just ineffectual and they're useless. Their faces are even blurred at certain points, like almost like they've been redacted from the book. And they're all men, of course. So these girls have their own wisdom. They don't need to tap into the coaches. But you're a teacher. You're a coach of sorts.
Just blur me out.
And I find you very inspiring. And so for the people here tonight who are maybe working on a novel or finishing a novel or in the ring with their writing, what would you say to them? Like when the bell goes off and the round is done, like what would you tell them? What was useful to you writing this book?
Oh, useful to me writing this book. Only write when you're driven to it. I don't know. There are like some writers out there who I don't know, like do things regularly. That works for them. I'm not one of those people. I feel that when I have the energy to go back to a project or write it, that's when it should be done. Ozreen Vondervliet Alumi said something really beautiful about writing Frau Keeler, that when she found the that when she found the book, the true structure and energy of the book, that writing it was like tapping into a vein, and she could go away for long periods of time and then come back to it. And that was my experience with this book, where I would write a section. It wasn't that I was continually revising the sections that I had written, but that I could go away and come back. And I had long periods like that. One other thing that maybe we'll end on in terms of the coaches is my very brilliant editors, Paul Slovak and Ali Marola. We had a really wonderful long conversation about the coaches and like what was going on with them, and I think we ended up discussing them as kind of like their energy was like the adults in Peanuts, like exactly. Like they were just like wow, like, yeah, they were like at the edges saying things that the girls were just like batting away, and are blurred out in that way. Yeah, Hilary, thank you so much for talking with me about the book. Thank you all so much for being here with me. It's incredibly meaningful. I'm really grateful. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and packing in to fill this space. Just a few final reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy of Headshot by clicking the link in the live stream description. For those of you here with us tonight, if you didn't get a copy already, we have plenty available for purchase at the table where you checked in outside. We also have copies of Land of Milk and Honey, early paperback copies of Biography of X, which doesn't officially come out until next week, so grab some of those. Hilary's novel Terror Story. We have copies of Hala's poetry collection, The Moon That Turns You Back. So please definitely feel free to check out all of those as well. Rita will be around right up here to sign your books. So as we kind of break down this space, feel free to line up down the center aisle and say hello, give her a hug, give her a nice compliment. And yeah, thank you all again so much for coming out. Let's give all these writers one last round of applause.